like how I introduce you. So I'm talking tonight with Drew Ladd. Drew is a fantasy author, activist, public speaker, and podcast host. He was a featured author at the Mark Twain House Writers Conference in 2020. His first novel, Wolfsong Beloved, launched in March of 2021. He also writes opinion and perspective pieces centering on race, racism, and white supremacy in America, as well as contemporary fiction that reflects his real world hopes, fears, and experiences. Apart from writing, he hosts the insightful and comedic podcast, Negroes in the Wild, where he explores the often hidden and unexamined life of the American Negro as they navigate the wilds of suburban America, equipped with only their wit and wisdom. You can keep up with Drew on Facebook Live, where he comments on and critiques racial oppression in America. You can also support him at patreon.com/Drew Writes Stuff. How's that for an introduction?
I was going to say, you made me sound like somebody in that introduction. Email that.
Say it with me. I am
like,
somebody.
Man, listen, I feel like we're all over Jesse right now. We can just admit it. It's not the 90s anymore. His ship has sailed. We can just admit it. Listen, Jesse, we believed in you. We still believe. You can listen. The snacks are over there. Just...
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so for those that don't know, man, I've actually been enjoying talking with you for almost an hour before we even started recording here tonight. Because I just love hearing from you. I love your perspective. Even when I disagree, you always challenge my thoughts. You always give me something to think about and make me go, huh, maybe 2 + 2 does equal 4.
Thank you.
And so I appreciate you for coming on. I kind of shared this is part of a project that we're doing with our human rights advisory committee in my town, and I'm part of that. And I said, I would like to be able to just do interviews of folks. There's creative folks, there's insightful folks out there, and they're all members of here's what you all have in common. You're all members of the LGBTQ+ community. And it's yes. Like, they're out there, they're among us.
Some cases they are you. Like,
that's right. That's right. But I wanted to hear, and this is also a great excuse for me because you and I haven't gotten together in a long time. And I wanted to hear your story because when we were together last, I didn't get to hear your full story anyway. So
you're excited to share it all the more.
You're so intriguing. So tell me about your childhood. Where did you, first of all, where did you grow up? Because I know I've heard you say before, a young gay Black kid from the city. So where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in Hartford, Connecticut. Okay. Until I was 17. So all the way up until I was in 3rd grade, I had never actually, other than the white lady that went to our church, I'd never actually seen a white person in person that wasn't a police officer. And I say that not lightly. I remember very specifically my first day of 3rd grade. From the moment I walked in the building to lunch, to going home, the bus ride home, I remember everything. It was, I won't say off-putting, but it was the first time I realized that maybe what people were telling me about the world wasn't all the way true. Like, all the stuff I had heard about white people before going to a predominantly white school, it turned out most of it to be not true. And I spent half the day paranoid about all of this silly stuff, and then the other half making friends. And I realized that, like, letting my guard down wasn't as big of a risk as other people made it seem. And maybe that was like their problem. And I could take a couple steps out in some things and explore a little bit more than some other people could. And like I said, that was the first time that happened, but it wasn't the only one. But my childhood was like.
But tell me more. I want to walk down that road. What had you been told? What was the view that you had?
Let me give you the whole tea. So I'm not gonna say who did it because I'm gonna keep people's name out my mouth because they ain't here to defend themselves. But like, I was a baby, so I was taught this. White people had money. Let's start there. White people have money. There's no such thing as a poor white person. The poorest white person has more money than a Black person with money. Their perspectives on money are skewed. That's what I was told.
So you're
Turned
saying
out it
there
was
are
not true.
there are poor white people?
The first friend I listen, there's not many, but they exist. Listen, even we win the lottery. Okay, look, hold up. Let me reverse that. But the first friend I made
No, that explains a lot, actually. I think
I was like, wait a minute.
now that you mention it.
Uncle Theophilus was right. The first friend I made in third grade, it turned out like when I got to know him, his mom and my mom had a whole lot in common. They were both single moms. They both struggled to provide for for 4 kids. She had 4 boys, and my mom had 3 boys and a girl. It just seemed like the same kind of life to me. Yes, they lived in a slightly better neighborhood, but I saw that as more circumstantial, and it turned out that that was kind of true. This isn't to say that everything equals out in the balance every time, but I found out that some things were worth measuring on a case-by-case basis. And I found out as I grew up, I could feel out what sorts of things were worth taking that chance on to see. Some things aren't always worth it. Like if you see a bunch of skinheads or bald white dudes in white, probably don't go over there and try to make friends. Don't jump that fence. But another, you know what I mean? But another one, like assuming that an old white dude is racist, which is nothing I was taught. Like
Right.
old white men in particular, they're just racist. It's just how they were coded, it's how they were taught, it's how they were raised. And like that's the last one I would think of all the things I was taught that I let go. Before I get to old white men are racist, the other things, white people chew food a whole different way. I remember that very specifically. I remember, yeah. I remember even watching movies. I'm not kidding at all. Listen, I was on the spectrum. I still am on the spectrum. Watching movies to see how people chew their food, how white people chew their food, and trying to do it like them for like weeks. I'm not kidding at all. I did. I really did it. That's why I had trouble with lunch that day. Anyway, oh, white people turn all kinds of colors. So I knew about blushing, but I'd never really seen it in real life. Like I have light skin cousins. My grandmother is blonde and pale. So I've seen blushing before, but it seemed like it would be a different thing. I don't know. It was just white people were completely foreign to me. And I want to be clear here. Like white people were foreign to me in my mind, in my head, right? In the idea I had formed in my head that was part what I believed and part what I was taught. It was a whole soup of things. But it had like white people were definitely real, but to me, like the version I had been taught just wasn't, it didn't comport with reality. It was a lot more nuanced. And I don't say that because everything is more nuanced. I say that in like, it was worth exploring. In a lot of ways that opened me up to exploring a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm not talking about the obvious, I'm talking about many, many other things like exploring life as a creative and other things I did in my youth to go out and see the world and all kinds of crazy chances I took that maybe I wouldn't have if I don't know, wouldn't have been opened up so young that the world could be so much like not better. I really want to stay away from that word because I think it sets a certain expectation of outcome. But the world can be richer by knowing things, by taking these chances, that even a loss can enrich you, that even harm taken from a risk properly assessed and take, that can enrich you, that can protect you in the future, just as much as any win can or any success. And I stopped looking at things as these binaries and just started looking at it as getting XP, like a like a gamer, just everything was XP. Yeah, it was a bunch of silly stuff I believe about white people. I didn't think that there was something about blue-eyed people couldn't go out in the sun or like when it was a certain UV something. There was a whole bunch of crazy stuff I had. White people sunburn, which turned out to be true. I did not believe people actually sunburn. I did not believe it at all.
Really?
My grandmother was as pale as a woman as I ever saw. She never sunburned. She never put on suntan lotion ever. My mom is pale. My younger brother is like the highest yellow. Never one time ever anyone ever sunburned ever like not in my whole. I have a family of literally thousands. I've never heard of anyone ever. I've heard of all kind of crazy other stuff. I've never one time up to that age and still now never heard of a sunburn. I myself at one point in life when I was less wise, I should say, fell asleep in the sun in Africa for hours and did not sunburn. There was a hole in the ozone above the beach where I was, did not sunburn. Let's not say it's healthy. I just didn't burn. So I didn't know what it looked like or anything. And I remember the first time I saw a sunburn going, wow. And I didn't know it was like, I thought it was just like a heat rash would come and it'll go away. I didn't know it was a whole process of exploding. Ugh, I did so. Ugh.
My whole life to this very day has been the converse. It has been white people saying to me, "You mean black people tan, and
Yeah,
some of them even burn?"
yeah.
I'm serious, and I of course laugh and joke, and I say, "Yeah, you'll see, because I'm going away down to Florida for a week, and when I come back, let's compare now, because when I come back."
We had the same, like, see, so the tanning thing I did get, and white people were surprised. Like, I didn't think white people sunburn, but they didn't think I could tan.
Right.
And like every year, my family would go south for the winter, like for a chunk of time, or we go south in the summer, and I would come back like summer black, like not just regular,
I like,
like
yes,
just
summer black.
like
Yes.
double dip chalk. You know what I mean? Like almost reflexively, like I look like a
Yes.
shadow with a person out, like, and I come back to school like blue black, and they couldn't even see nothing. And like, what happened to you? Like we just keep going like this until we ascend to
Oh
godhood.
my
I don't know.
goodness.
Never
And
gotten darker. We
my
just
mother, who is a little bit lighter skinned, she has both Native American, she has
yep.
Creole in her, and she will burn. She will burn. And again, when I've revealed this to white people, they're like blown away.
Yeah. See, like I think what this reveals, and a thing I wanted to add, and I'm thank you for bringing that up. Like the the misconceptions were on both sides. Like, yes,
Yes,
definitely me, and I want to own mine, so I can only speak
yes,
to mine personally.
yes.
But definitely there was stuff that people didn't understand about me,
Yeah.
and certainly there were a lot of
and,
preconceived
and I
notions that I
and
had to
I'm so
overcome.
glad you did say it too, because I think that when we talk about white misconceptions of black people, it's kind of like a given. In fact, most black comedy is built off of it, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
stand up or movies or what. But there's a lot of misconceptions that black people have of white people that
Oh my
generally
God.
go
So
unexplored, we'll say.
can we, yo, there's some that really bad. Can we talk about the mayonnaise? I'm just gonna say this real fast.
I
Like,
see. I
so
thought that's what I thought for sure that was going to be on your
you,
list.
you know what? I just got to get the mayonnaise out there real quick, real quick. So a moment in blackness, if you will. Let's rewind real fast, 30 seconds, no more.
Okay.
Undercover Brother was a film that came out. Remember? It was awesome. Thank you. Okay, you know exactly where
One
I'm
of,
going with
one of
this.
my favorite films.
Right. Well, I've seen it 1,000 times. I love
Yes.
it. The one scene that just always gets me is the scene with the mayonnaise on the sandwich. And I'm sitting
Yes.
here going, there's not black people out here eating dry sandwiches. Like, we
Right.
eat mayonnaise. What is this foolishness?
Yes.
And like, I get that the joke was that mayonnaise is kind of bland and we don't
Yes.
eat just mayonnaise, I
Right.
guess. But like that part of it, like it became a meme of its own that by the time I
Yes.
got to college, like white people had sort of repurposed it as like ironically, but I didn't get it because I never heard the mayonnaise thing. And it just seemed
I
like
grew
everybody
I
eats
grew up
mayonnaise.
on I grew up on mayonnaise in my house. It's me that likes the mayonnaise and my white wife who doesn't.
See, it's my super black, even though she's not out, well, she's not phenotypically, I guess, super black, but my super black grandmother likes mayonnaise. And it's me, my family is the Miracle Whip family. We're the outliers. We don't do, but it was like we knew we were the special. We were also the Pepsi family. We were very
Oh
different.
yes,
We
yes.
cut against all of the
Yeah,
grains. Like my family's a Coke family. We're a mayonnaise
right.
family. We're Hellmann's. We divide that line. We didn't have the money for that. We're Miracle Whip, and it was on sale. Listen,
Miracle.
we will switch it up in a heartbeat for a sale. That can sale will have you doing trick. Listen, you thought you liked those green beans until those were 99 cents, and suddenly.
All right. So that was man, that was great. So now you were experiencing the
Yeah,
reality and moving
yeah, it was.
beyond the perceptions that you had, the misconceptions that you had. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
I was like life before then wasn't useless. It wasn't like I just got a whole bunch of BS and then I went to a white school and was transformed. Rather, it was like a progression, like anyone's life is, from
Mm,
like knowing
mm,
into more knowing. So
mm.
while the first part of my knowing or the early knowing had a lot of ignorance associated with it, like I don't want to pin it on somebody as like intentionally teaching me a thing to steer me toward harm because I don't think anybody who taught me in either group or any group
Right.
taught me
Right.
anything intentionally really to harm me, but rather to steer me, and it brought me here,
Yeah.
right? Didn't it?
Yeah.
So I feel like the work that they did was, I don't know, was I want to say helpful. I think that's the best
Yeah.
way of putting it. And
Hmm.
I appreciated, especially as I got older, having those foundational relationships and experiences with people who didn't look like me. So I had something to rely on when things got tricky, because they did, because Black boys turn into Black men,
Right.
and we're not treated the same at all.
Mm.
Um, it isn't to say that everybody does it, but enough people do to where you notice, and enough people
Mm.
don't notice that you have to notice. I've even
Yeah.
had friends who treat me slightly differently, and after a year or two, it's like, you don't notice this thing, and
Mm.
then I'm like, oh, I don't know why that is. I'm like, I mean, I do. Listen, let's talk about it.
Mm.
Let's chat about it, because I find when I really want to create distance between myself and someone, I shame them, right? I call out all their stuff as
Mm.
shameful and bad, and blah, blah. I want to move them away from me. I don't feel safe around them. When it's someone that I love, and this is from like friendship, like we just met, kind of, sort of, and I sort of like you to my brother, right? I try to pull you in. I try to like talk to figure out what's going on with you, because I know that nobody I love would say, or you know what I mean? And
Mm.
it's maybe it's a little Pollyanna to think that, but I think it's the right way to love someone, rather
Mm.
than to, I don't know, push them out.
Yeah.
Um, I experienced a lot of that. So I obviously LGBTQIA plus to get everybody here. I came out when I was 20. So between 8 and 20, I had a lot of life. I guess I, I knew when I was 15, but I was already at that point. I had discovered trumpet when I was 6. And by the time I was 11, I played 9 instruments,
Oh,
including organ
wow.
at church. And by the time I was 15, I had already finished uh, a year touring. So I was like out there as a musician. And my mom, who hated it at first, was on board because I was making money. Uh, it was like my life couldn't have been more perfect at that point. I know it was 15, but like I couldn't be more perfect at that point, and I couldn't have been more terrified because I knew, but I thought, oh, this is gonna go away. And it was also that kind of toxic masculinity that's specific to Blackness in this way. I'm just gonna say it like that. For because it's a whole other discussion in itself. About me, just there was so much I got. I should back up a little bit. I love my church. I want to say that even now, even from the position I'm in right now, I love my church. And I don't think anyone there, then or now, had any negative intention or any kind of thing like that. Regardless, what I was taught horrified me about at least about myself, what I was taught to believe. And we could even go as far as to be super generous to say what I believe I was taught to believe. You know, it's a little amorphous, but what I was taught to believe about myself just wasn't complimentary and didn't inspire complimentary thoughts about myself. And I had a whole lot of mental health issues, like a lot of us in this community tend to have. That experience of
I
being,
want to clarify, and I want to be clear. What you
sure.
were taught to believe about yourself as a
Oh,
person in general, or specifically towards the fact that you were gay?
oh, specifically toward the fact that I was gay.
Okay.
See, when I say my life was fine, I mean, the only issue I had at 15, which how you have an issue at 15, but the only issue I had was being gay. And at first, when it first started to occur to me, it was the same time that things started to occur to other kids. So I
Okay.
didn't think anything of it. Like
Okay.
when I hear kids now talk about, or hear adults now talk about, oh, I knew when I was 10, or I knew when I was 6. I'm like, that makes sense to me. That's when like sexuality starts to emerge. It doesn't mean you act on it, but it's when
Right.
you start feeling something slightly different. And for queer people, and I just use that umbrella
Hmm.
generally to cover everyone rather than spouting out a whole alphabet soup, but
Hmm.
queer folk tend to experience that with a little bit of trauma, because finding out who you are comes with sort of a necessary secret for so many of us. Not everybody. There's a whole lot of winners and more every day, thankfully. But there's a whole lot of people who don't know any better or don't want to know any better or do any better, anything else like that, that cause a lot of harm, and it gets attached to what otherwise should be like not a crowning moment, but a great moment in your life, right? You're moving into your adulthood, you're discovering this new part of yourself, new aspect of your identity. And instead, before you even have a chance to understand it, you get shackled with all these things about it that you don't understand. Like you don't have the head to understand sin at 15. I don't care how sophisticated you are. I'm saying no one has the ability. Even now, I can't comprehend eternal punishment or anything else. It, those things to lay on a child, it was too much for me. I can speak to, and too much for so many people that I've met. It's just, even if that's the message, and look, I can decry the message all day and all night and have. I'm not going to do that. But even if that's the message, I felt like it should have just been delivered in love, and that just wasn't love. Telling somebody they're going to die like that, a child, that's not love. I've heard people try to describe it as love and say something akin to, well, if you saw somebody who's about to get hit by a car, wouldn't you scream, move, and push them out the way? And then afterward, no, it's not the same, because I'm not in imminent danger and you can relax. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it can't be just sex and don't worry about it unless you're gay and then, oh my God, you're going to hell. So I had to deal with all of that as a teenager, and like I didn't have the vocab to even deal with, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I struggled with it for years. I mean, there wasn't the internet like there was now. It was 1995. The internet had just become a thing, but only for certain people in certain areas in certain ways. Certainly, it wasn't the juggernaut of everything that it is now. So you couldn't Google. There was no such thing as Google. You couldn't look
Right.
anything up on the internet. It didn't exist. God, oh. So I had to like wing it. Like I try to tell it to kids now, like y'all have smartphones, you can look up everything. I had to just guess. Like simple things, like how does sex work? I had to go off of rumors. Understand? Yeah, rumors. There was no internet to guide me. I didn't have a whole bunch of friendly gays out in the background. And I'm 15. What do I look like trying to approach an adult man? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I had a gay uncle, thank God. But even that, like my uncle was so cool. And I say this, I have nothing but absolute love in my heart for my uncle. My uncle was so cool about it. Like we never got to discuss it because it never came up. We were in his apartment with his husband. It never came up. We were just hanging with my uncle. I didn't care. He didn't care. And so it never, with him, since it was such a non-issue, it never got to that critical point of me needing to talk about it when he was around. And unfortunately, he passed away before I came out. And I say unfortunately doubly so, one, because I love my uncle, and two, because I would have loved to have shared coming out with him.
Yeah.
I looked at it at the time as something that was so horrifying. I was 20 years old. I was into 2 years of college. I was a year into failing out. I was depressed to almost being immobilized, but I was compelled to do all of this stuff. I had 21 credits. I was just absolutely overwhelming myself at work, so I didn't have to feel any of this stuff. And I came out. It was like I was so under pressure. I was in my room at my desk. My roommate was going to bed, and I just came out. I just did it. I was terrified.
How did you come out?
So I was sitting at my desk. I was drinking Chivas Regal. I was on purpose. That tells you how old I was at the time. Just pin it to the time, not my character. Pin it to the time, not my character. And I was drinking. I was slugging it down. I was enjoying it. Oh, I remember enjoying it so much. Oh my God, my mouth. Anyway, so I'm drinking Chivas Regal. My roommate, who I had met, I was part of a program where I went to college 3 months before the first semester, and I was on campus and took some classes and all sorts of kind of stuff. It was like 96 kids. Gave us a kind of jump start and getting to know the campus, a bunch of stuff. And I made a friend who was my first roommate, and then he became my roommate my first year of college. So he was still my roommate then. And I wasn't drunk, but the set was right. You know what I mean? Like it looked like I had the excuse set built in. So in case I wanted to back out the next day, even though now it's ridiculous, but I was 20. I didn't know nothing. So I'm here, I'm drinking.
I mean, had you thought that through?
I had not.
No.
Like I said, I was.
But that's pretty cool on the fly to be like, yeah, if this doesn't turn out right, I can always say, dude, I'm
right.
so
I could
sorry,
just
man.
like, look, yeah, I was
Did something happen last night? I don't know.
Right. Listen, I don't know.
Blacked out.
And I had the best cover, well, not the best cover, but like I was already, I was sexually active and not with men up to that point.
Okay.
So I already had like the quote unquote perfect cover, whatever that is. And it's still, I was just being crushed under the weight of it. And so even though I I remember wanting to wait until I was actually drunk. I couldn't. He was, because my room, that's right. My roommate was dead set on going to bed. I've never seen a person where he stays up until 3 a.m, this guy, until this night. And all of a sudden now it's 9 o'clock and his lights out. No, I couldn't process it. And I think he could tell I wanted to talk about something. He was trying to just hurry up and get to bed. So that got me talking. I can't even remember what I said. I can just remember him asking me directly if I'm gay. And I said, yes. And it was like somebody shot, I could feel my heart explode, like somebody shot me. And I was like, well, there's your whole life. That's everything. Everything you just built up to now was just done. So I came out to my mom via email. And this is worse than that. Let me back that up a little bit. I talked my mom into getting an email address. Then when she didn't get one, signed her up for one. Then when she didn't use it, bought her a computer, not playing. Had her,
was it
like,
AOL?
taught her to use it. Yes, it was, sir. Yes, it was. AOL 3.0. Might have been 3.0. Had her sign in, had her make friends, got my grandma and grandpa online. I'm not kidding about any of this. Then sent this long sob story email. After all of that, I didn't think to save the email or anything. I don't have any copy of it anywhere. Really? I don't even use that email anymore. And I'm kind of glad I don't have it, to be honest. I know what I said, and I'm glad I didn't see the specifics of it, for two reasons. One, because I like knowing that I remember the truth of it, and I don't have to have the letter of it. I think the truth of it might get muddled by the letter of it and me trying to find intention where there was none, or missing it where there was some. I remember the truth of the feeling of that moment. That's the thing that carries me forward. And two, I'm a better writer now. I can write a better coming out letter, and I have more experience. I have more rind on me. You know what I mean? I got more poetry in my soul right now.
Look at that and be like, yeah, that's some of my older work. That's trash. It's trash.
Right, like, listen, just
let me compose
right,
my coming out letter today.
Listen, let me just rewrite it now to myself from an elf's perspective. We can't do that. We're not using
Did you? 20 years ago when you wrote this, it was crap. Let's be honest, brother.
Listen, it was, the way you came out was trashy. It was trashy.
I'm offended by the way.
And you know what? Your only excuse, there was no Facebook. This is your only excuse. That would have been a tier lower. The Facebook come out was like, isn't it detailed? Like, I feel like now with it. Like, anyway. So I sent my mom this email, and then I stay up all night. My hands are shaking now. Oh my God. I stay up all night. I'm horrified. I just came out to my Christian mom. So I haven't said that. You know this, but my mom's a preacher. My father's a preacher. Grandparents, aunts, uncles.
I remember you sharing that you were a PK.
Oh yeah, everyone you can name in my family is a preacher in some way involved in church. Except for me, very few people are not involved in church. So it was the waiting was by far the hardest part.
Yeah.
So before all of this, and just as a mini flashback, when I was a kid, my mom would say to me and growing up, my mom would say to me all the time, and I would ask her, does she think I'm going to get married? And does she think I'm going to have a family and all this? I've wanted a family. So like ever since I can't even remember. Like my whole life I wanted a family, because my family was missing my dad. My dad left when we were really young. I was 6, 7.
Oh, wow.
And we had a spotty relationship up until my early 30s, and then we just stopped talking. So
siblings? Do you have siblings?
I have an older brother, a younger sister, and then a younger brother in that order. And we're all about a year apart. So my older brother, older brother's
I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to knock you off track, but I was trying to think of the dynamics of, if you're an only child, that'd be one thing, but now you're also doing this within your family, within your siblings.
Middle child.
Middle child. Yeah, always trying to get attention, you middle children.
See, you know what is, the crazy part is too, like, I tried very much not to be an attention getter at all. I very much just like, again, especially as a little spectrum kid, I haven't figured myself out yet. I just want to be by myself with books. That was my favorite. I didn't like being around people. Just made me agitated. I felt like there's all these rules. I didn't know. Now I've trained myself to interact with people, but this is like a performance. The real me wants to be over there with a cheese sandwich, like you know what I mean, like reading a book or writing one. I don't like interact. But my mom always said when I asked about family, my own family and everything, she would say, "Oh, I've already seen your family." Like she would say it. You have to hear the way she says it. I know you've heard preachers before. You have to hear the way she said, like, is she said like it was just a fact. I can't I can't emphasize that enough. It was the way she said it, just it didn't sound like she was trying to make it come true or she was hoping for it to come true. She's like she actually saw it. She was like it was she said she saw my wife and she saw I had two kids, a boy and a girl. And I was like, yeah, I don't want girl. I think I could deal with that. And I said, like, anyway. So I remember
Now
when I
you're,
sent that letter and I was thinking about that
yeah, now
when I
you're
sent the
waiting for the
letter and I'm like,
response.
I've not only mangled my life, but I destroyed my mom's dreams. And she sent me, thankfully, the next day, probably the next night or something, she sent me an email. I can't remember when I got it. I can just remember when I saw there was the email, I cried because I knew whatever the email said, it was the end of whatever relationship we had before, even if it was going to be a better one, supposedly, whatever you want to
Yeah.
measure. It just was the end of what was before. And I loved my relationship with my mom growing up. I know some people don't have the most comfortable experience um, grown up in a single parent household. And I won't say every day was roses or even most of them, but the ones that were the rosiest rose. And on top of that, I wouldn't trade a single moment of that experience. So I wouldn't wish for it or wish it on anyone, but I wouldn't trade it. It's, I don't know. I think my pain in that way has shaped me as much as my progress, my wins. My losses are on the record just as much as my wins are. They're just a part of me, you know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
don't see them as subtractions,
Right.
right? I see them as like lessons. They really are. Some of them were hard lessons, some of them are unnecessary lessons, but they were. And I think there's something that can be taken from them. It doesn't
Oh,
mean that
right.
all
Yeah.
trauma should be parsed in that
Not
way.
only, yes, there's something to be taken. I mean, that's, yeah,
Right.
that's wisdom there, is to realize that.
I don't think all trauma should be processed in that way. I want to be clear, just like because a lot of queer folk experience a lot of trauma, and I don't want to tell people that you should land on, you know what, everything's square. I don't
Mm.
think that's where everyone should land. Like resolve your own issues
Hmm.
in your own heart, like resolve it with your own wisdom. I think that's the best way to do it. Like take what you know and what you've learned from other people and apply it with love to your life. That's how you do it. And sometimes love means knowing when to walk away, whatever. Anywho. So I was thinking this to send my mom this email. Um, I get an email back, and the first line says, "You are still my son." So I read that, and I just start crying all over the place
Crying. Yeah, I was
again.
gonna say,
I
I
can't
almost
even,
got a tear right here, bro.
right.
I almost got a tear.
And I was like, that was the last thing I expected the thing to say. So it just took me forever. Like I cried all over again. It took me
Yeah.
forever to even get to the rest of the email.
Yeah.
I even remember like laughing about it because it was like, how are you gonna cry where a sentence you can get this whole email? My mother's a
Right.
writer
It
as
could say,
well.
but.
And so I knew it was gonna be this whole long. And sure enough, I scroll and it's like, look at this. This is the old internet. Even letters loaded slow. She got a whole Bible on her. Okay, so I go to read this thing, and it starts off really good. And I'm talking from my perspective, obviously, but it starts off really good, saying you're still my son and all this, and I still love you, and da. And then it goes right back, like nothing changed. She said, "I know what you're feeling now, and you think it's true, but I've seen your wife and I've seen your kids." And
Right.
like when she said, like when I read that this time, it ran up against something in me. I can't describe it. It wasn't willful. It just, I felt it hit something that hadn't hit before. It used to just go right through me like the truth. And this time it was like, nope. And it was very practical. It wasn't like a rebellious, I know what that feels like. This was like hitting something that was just, I don't know. Um, so for a while, things were pretty bad after I came out. I got cut off. I can say it laughing now, but I was, man, I didn't have no money to start with. How you gonna cut somebody off? There's nothing to cut off. I dropped out of school. I remember the day I dropped out of school. It was the worst. It started off as the worst day. It was gray. It was raining. It was that kind of cold, that autumn cold where it's like cold gets into everything and it's wet. Everything is wet and cold. You just can't get warm enough. It was like that. Your skin is gray. Everything's terrible. And I had spent all day putting it off. And I knew if I hadn't done it, I would not withdraw. And it was the last day to withdraw from school. So I walked myself over to the registrar. I was just, it was the worst feeling. I had like my whole neighborhood. I was the first kid to go to college. It felt like I had let like a universe of people down.
Yeah. You felt, man.
And but I knew it was the right thing to do. I knew I had to do it. It was one of the few moments in my life where it felt like I was making a decision, like a hard decision as a man. And it was one I did not want to make.
Hmm.
But I went to the registrar's office and I withdrew and I walked out Wilbercross building. And I remember taking 2 steps down the stairs with my hand on the rail, and I could not go any. I just like it was like I had just reached as far as my body could go. I just couldn't do it, and I was like, this day can't get any worse. I just can't go further in this. And like right then, the clouds just separated. I swear to you, this happened. It's like instantaneously separated. And I started laughing because I could see my shadow. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I guess I'm supposed to have a good day now because the sun came out. And then a friend just showed up and was like, you want to go to dinner? It was like the whole rest of my day was like that. I didn't really understand it then because I thought, why would God let me have a good day? I'm gay. Why would that must have been, I just built that up in my head as all these things. And it wasn't until much later that I could see that it was really the day, I don't know. I wouldn't have had a good ending to my day if I didn't end my day gay. I don't know how else to say that. I couldn't have gone back home and pretended to be anyone other than myself and loved myself. I couldn't love the pretense anymore. I could only love me. I think that's what her letter hit up against is like me loving myself, not more than my mother, but me loving myself. Full stop. Um, it was difficult for some years. Like I struggled. I really wanted to go back to school, and I couldn't. And it was the most frustrating thing in the world to me. Uh, I ended up moving to Boston and joining a band, and I had the time of my life. I regret absolutely nothing. Like I know it should be a life lesson, but no, that was amazing. I was there when the Sox broke the curse and won the series. I was there when the Sox beat the Yankees. Like I lived on the building right across from uh, Boston Conservatory, and I could hear the crack of the bat from Fenway. I would sit on the roof and have beers with my roommates. It was like that was one of the best years of my life, and it was also the first time I was ever out anywhere as the default. Because in Connecticut, I used to be straight, but
Yeah.
in Boston, nobody knew who I was. So
Yeah.
every time somebody met me, the first time they met me, they were meeting gay Drew. And that was its own milestone, right? Because before it was I could always go back into that closet. It was always waiting. Because that old suit was still there and everybody knew it and everybody liked it. But here, there was no old to run back to. I couldn't do straight for them because they only ever known me as gay. And the longer I was there, the longer I felt not it was a choice, but the longer I felt it was something I was allowed to inhabit. Does that make any sense? Like
Yeah.
at home, it felt like I could not be this. I could not be I don't want to say myself because my sexuality isn't all of me, but
Right.
also just like any other body, if you pinch off one part of me, it's going to hurt all of me. All of me is going to notice. All of me is going to suffer. If you pinch off my pinky toe, I'm a limp. My whole body's going to change. You pinch off my pinky, you know what I mean? Like everything changes because of that one pinched off suffering part. And that's how it was for me. Everything got connected to my sexuality because it wasn't getting enough. It wasn't getting any oxygen. I moved to Boston. All of a sudden, I'm able to be a whole person. And it became the least interesting thing about me, which I
Right.
loved. I loved it. It was at least like no one cared. I remember very specifically I don't remember my first kiss for a million reasons. I remember my first official kiss. I don't remember my first kiss, but I do remember my first kiss uh, from a guy in public. I was I was terrified, and I had been out for like 5 years. I had dated a little bit, but I was still I had a lot of church in me that needed to be processed. It doesn't mean it was anti-gay
Right.
necessarily. It just means that my beliefs and the extensions I had built onto them and things I had been taught, all that kind of stuff, it just needed to be worked out. I need to reconcile that, and I hadn't done it yet. But I was on a date with this cute guy, and I couldn't believe I was on a date. I just thought it was the most incredible thing ever. Um, we went to a restaurant with pad thai. I hate pad thai. I ate the whole thing. I hated it. I couldn't have been happier. It's like, oh, I hated it. I ate the entire thing. Pretended to love every bit. Oh, we got to come back. Oh, Jesus. Okay. And we go we go across the street. We walk past a couple music stores. We're talking, we're gabbing. Everything's great. We stop and sit on the lawn of the Christian Science something something with the great big lawn and reflecting pool. So we're sitting on the grass. It's the middle of the day. People are walking back. Just this Boston is doing this thing. I love this city. I don't like people. I love the smell and the pulse of this. It's just that's where I don't know. That's where my blood gets running. Anywho, so he looks over at me, and I know he's about like he's making that face, right? Everybody knows the face. He's making that face. I'm like, all right, well, I'm on a date with a cute guy. Do I say yes to the cute guy or to like the city around me? I'm like, I guess I'm gonna say yes to you. Let's see what happens. Because I was like, you're already out. You're already on a date with a guy. They already see you. Just so the last thing I remember, like I kissed the guy. I remember that, and then I remember like somebody just turning down the knob on me caring. It just instantly became way less important. Like it's not like I didn't care because I was still very aware that it could be dangerous because it was 2005. Let's be honest. But still, it didn't. I don't know. I wasn't concerned about what people thought about me or what they would overlay. I just didn't care, and it was awesome. He turned out to be awful, but that day was great, and I'm keeping that. So I, I went forward, and it took me another 10 years um, before I kind of like wrapped myself around and found like a decent person. But it was worth it. And all that time of being single and basically having to experience childhood again. One of the things I talk with my queer friends and I often talk about is like second puberty, where you have your first puberty, where your body changes, but you're not allowed to touch your sexuality. It's the most ridiculous puberty ever because it couldn't be more forefront in your life and it couldn't be more forbidden. And only queer people really experience that level of like you're not allowed to be you in this fundamental way. And then when you're finally in your 20s or whenever you come out, now you have all of that. Like I didn't have any sex during the time when I wanted to have sex, period, and all the other everything else that everyone else gets to explore when they're stupid and teenagers. You're now doing that when you're in your 20s, and the stakes are way higher. Right. It's super chancy, and thankfully, I was surrounded by a ton of um, queer people, in particular, people from the Bear community in Connecticut were just wonderful to me, just flat out. I did not expect to meet a fraternity of brothers that would be not only supportive, but friendly. It always sort of felt like since other people made sex like the main my sexuality, that was always going to be the thing. When you go to a gay bar, it's about sex. When you go to a gay event, it's about sex. And I found out that was just the case for other people. That wasn't the case for me or almost anyone I ever met. It was just about we get to be here and not have to worry about whether or not it's about sex or about anything else, just like everyone else out in the world. And we have pretty much the same lines of delineation as everyone else in the world.
A safe or comfortable environment it was about.
Yeah. So I, even after I came out, I didn't go to a gay bar for almost a year. I just didn't see
Yeah.
the need. It was just like, eh. I never tried to sneak into a gay bar or anything else like that. And then when I was finally like old enough and everything, it became, all right, well, why aren't you going? And I figured, you know what, I'll go one time to say I went, but I know it's not going to be my thing. I always felt like when I was in my 20s, I felt like not that I was unique, but I just didn't feel gay enough. I remember when I went to a meeting, I think they were called Aqua at the time at UConn, whatever the Queer Alliance at UConn was. And I don't mean to say that dismissively, but the Queer Alliance at the time at UConn, I went and visited them during a meeting twice. And one time specifically, I remember they were discussing a drag show the entire time. Nobody talked to me. Like, I tried to sit near people and talk to them. It just didn't work. It was a disaster. They were using words and terminology that I just didn't understand anything. And it felt like I got to go up to the gates of the party, but I wasn't allowed in. So, and part of that was my own insecurity. I mean, they missed a thing, but also so did I. So mutual, at least in that instance. And I had to find support elsewhere. And like I said, I found it in this fraternity of guys who were, you would think stereotypically would be super predatory. Most of them were 15, 20 years older than me. And never one time ever in, God, more than a decade, never one time anyone ever over multiple states. And if anything, they were super protective of me. And I got a lot of great advice earlier that at first seemed a little bit forward, I'll say. I think that's the polite word to use, forward, but it was still true. And I found out that most of the hangups I had about the way I was being given information were my own and not, it was just stuff I had my own to deal with. And as I grew into my sexuality, which everyone does, by the way, I know that's obvious, but like everyone does, because we often talk about the gay experience as if it's unique, as if discovering your sexual identity and exploring that is a unique thing to gay or queer people. And it just isn't. It's every single human being does it. Some of us get in really weird places when we do it. That's just what happens. It's the same thing when you're finding your own personal identity. It's the same thing when you're finding your voice in any medium. Like, if I get frustrated about anything, especially now, is like now I'm a middle-aged, oh my God, I'm a middle-aged queer. Wow. But it just sounds like a joke, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, it do. I don't want to cut you, but you said something intriguing, or that intrigued me. You said, it was 10 years before you found somebody decent.
yeah.
Did you, okay, so prior to coming out, you said that, you had sex with women.
Yeah.
But did you date? Did you have a girlfriend prior to coming out? Okay, so now
I did.
here's my question is, and it sounded like that. It sounded like you did because the way you kind of cloaked some of the things you said about, you had the backup ready or whatever. Anyway,
yeah.
Here's my question. Again, I'm going back to this question of 10 years before you found somebody decent. When you dated, when you dated women or had a girlfriend, did you date women that were decent? So that's what I'm leaning towards, is that it kind of didn't matter whether it was men or women.
No.
The work you had to do on yourself had to do with you on yourself, so that therefore you could then find the right person, whether it was a man or a woman.
Right. So the delay in finding the right person, I'm glad you highlighted that. Thank you. The delay in finding the right person had nothing to do with, I guess it had everything to do with like everything being delayed. Like my whole like natural movement into my sexuality had essentially been delayed by 10 years. So it makes sense that I didn't find anybody until after and I don't even say got my wild years out, because it wasn't really that for me. It wasn't. I had way more sex before I came out than once I came out, it was like, it meant something. And this is like no shade at all to the women I dated, because I did have feelings, and like I thought as a teenage boy thinks, well, if I just keep doing this, I'm gonna like it. And it did feel good, and I did have feelings. But it was it didn't even compare to even a guy touching my hand. It wasn't even close. It wasn't even close. I could have a whole fantastic weekend with a girlfriend. It didn't even compare to like when my crush looked at me. I could live off of that for like a year. And by the time like I said, like moving, when I finally got the chance to explore that, I don't want to say that, but it's a side effect of having it delayed was I got to explore my sexuality when I was a lot more mature. I got to make a lot more mature decisions. And while I don't think I would have made immature decisions. I think I would just learn my lessons earlier.
Mhm.
Part of me is glad a little bit because I got to experience it a little bit closer to now.
Mhm.
Um, and because I don't know, I know some of the people that I was hanging around with when I was a teenager. I'm glad I didn't have those experiences with them. I'm glad I got to wait till a little bit later. And really, when I did find the right person, it wasn't really about finding the right person. It was about allowing myself to be found by someone,
Hmm.
and like being able to properly judge healthy relationships and move forward.
Yeah,
Like,
and that's what I was leaning towards. Was it more about learning, that process of learning how to discover healthy relationships, or
yeah,
recognize when this is not healthy, so I need to get out of it.
yep. The thing I think that's the most unremarkable, but also I guess unexpected from a queer perspective, especially a person who was coming out at the time, and it may be different for queer youth now. I won't speak for them. Like I didn't expect it to be so normal. Like I didn't expect it to be like not. It's not one-to-one relative. I want to be clear on that because like there's a whole bunch that comes with that delay. It's not just put off. There's a whole bunch that goes into that vacuum, but it's essentially the same, right? Because in the end, we all come to our sexuality the same way through allowance. Someone has allowed you to do this, even if it's just yourself. Someone made a path for you. I look at my uncle as a person who made a path for me, and not metaphorically, but literally. My uncle was very effeminate, and I say that to highlight really his strength of character. My little fear of being this and being out, like not being so feminine, whatever else, and my uncle being ridiculed on a regular basis from every angle for just being a human. Like I used to think it was because, oh, he's effeminate and they want him to be more masculine. But then I realized if he was more masculine, they would just make fun of him using effeminate language. And if he were more anything else, they would just find another void that he's not filling. He would never be big enough for them. And also at the same time, he was too big for them because they couldn't see all of him. All they could see was this little part they kept making fun of that really it was an extension of so many other wonderful parts that integrated to them. And they had isolated this thing, they had reduced him to something. And when I watched his character in the face of all of that, this is not like seeing necessarily dignified responses or quiet little, it wasn't always that. When I watched who the man was for real, right? Like how kids watch adults, I saw the most manly man I had ever seen in my life. I thought of any of the men in my life going up against what he had. And like y'all, none of y'all would even survive. Y'all complain about traffic. Are you serious? Like, come on now. Y'all complain. I thought of what strength it takes not only to survive a childhood where you didn't have all these avenues that I had, and I had few, and then to come out not only like as a human being and but a thriving human being. It was, to me, it was extraordinary. It still is extraordinary. I look back at, there was a time where the first gay bar I went to, I eventually ended up going back multiple times because the first time I went, I think I got it, and I was like, oh, I don't have to be gay here. I could just be that guy. This is awesome. And if I happen to see somebody I like and wave, that's the thing. All right, cool. It just felt like a place where I could just take off gay and just be Drew. It feels like it should be the opposite, right? Like you walk into a gay bar and now you're extra gay. And sometimes that's the case. And really, a lot of times that is the case because, like, being extra gay, whatever that means, like, so, I don't know, like being free to be whatever person you are
Right.
should be a part of everybody's, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
performative
Right.
vocabulary. And the bar really and other places like that allowed me to sort of not only experience it, but cultivate it in a healthy way. Because you still have societal rules, right? You still can't get too crazy drunk, you get kicked out. You still have people monitoring you. You still have taboos. You still have all this other kind of stuff, even though things can get crazy, I'll admit. But you still have all of these measuring sticks, and you still have people who are watching your back in these places. It's not like some Wild West. And all the things I had been taught, I learned the same about like white people that were untrue. The same percentage seemed to be true about queer people as well. And I'm like, man, people are worth getting to know.
All right,
And
all right. Let's finish on that. I want our time is unfortunately, and we're gonna have to do this again. But let's finish on that.
Okay.
I think that's a perfect way to bring us full
Yeah.
circle. The perceptions,
Yeah.
that you grew up with and that you had of LGBTQ plus, the perceptions that you have versus what you have, what you now know is far more true.
Yeah.
Talk to me about them.
So I was taught that all manner of queer people are sinners. And I grew up, as much as you did, in an era where the very polite, well, I don't want to say very polite, I'm saying that ironically, very polite language that we use to describe queer people and all the letters that we've allowed them to use weren't used. They used very one or two syllable words to describe us, and none of them were complimentary and none of them were inclusive. Um, I it was the worst thing in the world to be. I remember being in the church parking lot with my mom, and a preacher had come that night, young man who's around my same age. He's a little flamboyant. I didn't detect that. And it's not that there's anything to detect, but I didn't see it as effeminate or anything. I just thought he was just a young man like me. I didn't see nothing. And out in the parking lot, my mom was talking with another mom, and they were making gay jokes. And I didn't realize they were making gay jokes until the lady started laughing when she made some joke about me. And my mom responded with a perfectly straight face, all of a sudden serious. And she said, "All my boys are real men." I'll never forget that as long as I live, because I remember even then, it was like I was too young to know that I was gay then, I think. But it still kind of hit me. It was like, what? Uncle Elijah's a real man. There were a bunch of things I had to learn by allowing myself to learn, like letting my guard down. And there was a whole nother level of things I had to learn by moving into some really uncomfortable spaces, like things I never thought I would be able to understand, and getting to the edge of my comfort and a little bit further sometimes to really not be desensitized, but to really like understand some things from a new perspective. There's a lot. The queer community is wide and deep, and there's a whole lot to learn, and always more every day, like it is with any group of people. But I think the thing that I get from being queer perspective wise that I wouldn't have gotten from being gay specifically, is getting a front row seat to like all the worst homophobia of all time, right in your face, and when no one knows that you're gay. I had that for 20 years. So it wasn't like everyone had, like I had fulfilled the promise, right? I had the girlfriend, I had the long-term girlfriend. I was gonna get married. I had that, everything was coming in, right? And then all of a sudden I destroy all of that. I know firsthand what people's disappointment feels like after they have appointed you wrongly. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to have a gap that you can't fill, no matter how good you are, successful you are, anything else, because you won't ever be that thing they want you to be. And it's gone from it being this opposite, this opposing force, gay and straight, to just being this other thing. Like I used to think of it as sinful and horrible and disease and and all this kind of stuff was pinned on it from other people. And then when it became me, I was terrified of me. And then I was like, wait a minute, I know me. Even if nobody else thinks I'm gay, I think I'm okay, people. Let me explore me. And after I got to know me, it was like, well, okay, I guess I'm probably okay. Let me see other people. And I haven't met an evil I met some terrible ones, but I haven't met an evil queer person. I guess you say I've met as many evil queer people in the percentage as met anyone else. And in fact, I would say I hesitate to say it, but I'll say it because I found it to be true. So it's anecdotal. We can leave it there. But I found queer people to be more empathetic largely because they know what it feels like, intimately, most of them, to be rejected on that level. I think it's something a lot of people don't consider, in particular when asking queer people questions about their lives or any other kind of thing like that, how much like we want to be included when asked about our love lives or any other kind of thing like that. And just the, I don't know, the normalizing of, I would love one day to just be Drew. I know that can't be today or soon. I know that. I know we got a lot of work to do. And to be clear, I'm happy being whatever letter y'all want to put on me until then. If it means I get to stand in the way of some kid committing suicide or some other kind of yeah, put it on me. Give me all the G's and the B's. Give me all of them. But I can't wait until I can just be Drew. Because straight people don't have to introduce themselves. The straight people don't have to come out. And I can't wait for a world. And I know this one is coming. I know it is. I can't wait for the world in which that's no longer an issue. And I say I know it's coming because we've had it. We've had that world before, multiple times. Sexuality has only come up as a really controversial topic in the 20th century, late 19th century, 20th century. Right? It wasn't a thing we were concerned about. And suddenly we had this huge moral retraction and we appended a whole bunch of things to it that were never there before, including sexuality. And now we're going through and destroying ourselves. And we're not identifying it as destroying ourselves. We're not identifying all of these trans and queer. It's one thing to talk about suicides as statistics and areas and groups of people in general, because you can hide a whole lot in that 8% or 11% or 28%, can't you? It's just a number, because you can reflect on that 72%. That's still most of them. But when you look at just the humanity of that, the humanity of what we're losing, and this is not just death, right? Because death is in death, at least there's some finality. The trauma at least has an end point. Even if it's a bloody and a horrible one, it ends. But it's in the survivors that we traumatize daily with our indifference, with our callous language, with our lack of willingness to adapt, even though we do it all the time for straight people. Miss May can get married tomorrow and be Miss Smith, and every last person in that office will have that new name in their mouth. Bet that. Matter of fact, before she left, y'all had the office, the thing on her door changed to reflect her new name. And yet we can't get trans people right. That's BS to me. I'm learning so much about how, or rather, I don't want to say learning, but I am, about the things that stood between not just me and happiness, but queer people and fully realized lives. Let's just say it like that. And it isn't us and our trauma. It isn't. In the same way that we talk about Black people, we tend to talk about Black people, we tend to talk about queer people as like trod upon, right? We discuss them as being rooted in some kind of trauma, typically linked with coming out and people not liking it. When in reality, we are happy human beings in this world who only want as much space as everyone else. Some of us a little more, we're dramatic, but like, and when I realized that and the fullness of that, right? This is not just a bunch of people who aren't straight, right? But it's that straight doesn't even matter and never has, and it's an artifice anyway. And we've all been seated at the same table eating the same thing. We're just asking to be served the same thing at the same time in the same amounts. Stop starving us, but that's it. Learning the truth about my aliveness, my wholeness, right? Including me being gay for now, right? Because I don't know, I have no idea, right? That's what made me love myself. And loving myself is what made me really, I don't know. It used to be all about, I don't want anybody calling me F-bomb. And now it's like, I don't want anybody calling Timmy or Judy or Alec or anybody. I don't want any of that to happen to them. When I hear about kids who never had to come out, like I see queer kids in high school now, I can't even tell you how hard it is not, I get choked up. You see two girls walking down the hall and it's nothing. You see two, it's nothing. They don't give it a second thought. It doesn't even come up in their mind. And I realized in that moment that that's the first glimpse of that world I was talking about, that world in which I'm a raggedy old man confused about the world around me because it's progressed beyond my capacity to understand. Isn't it? Is that the first thing? I'm standing there, I'm the only one shook at this moment, seeing something just regular. Everybody around me, it's not even entering their minds, and I'm sitting here in a near panic. I realized that near panic is inevitable. And I say inevitable in as far as we are committed to our goodness and progressing forward. Inevitable in as much as we love ourselves and continue to do the job and the work of loving ourselves. And ourselves means our communities and our countries and everyone around us, all the intricate connections and everything else, as far as we feel moved and beyond. It takes, when we talk about America again, and I know we were talking about Blackness earlier in Above America, but I feel like all these kinds of hurts and these assets, really, because that's what we're mostly talking about, right? Assets are all part of the American identity that we are denying. And when we incorporate that, we necessarily strengthen ourselves. Again, like I said before, we enrich ourselves in bringing people in, not in acceptance necessarily. Look, I don't need you to be all right with me being gay. I'm gonna have whoever I'm gonna have anyway and be whoever I'm gonna be, right? But I need you to be okay with me being in the world because I'm gonna be okay with you being in the world regardless. And we realize that we've always had that strength. Haven't we always been okay with the KKK being in the world? We've never asked the US to delete the KKK. We never have. And like they're a terrorist organization. We're not okay with it, but like we're not actively trying to out them. And we have the manpower. We million man march. You don't think we could million man march in the other direction? There's something about that allowance that when I was a kid, when I was a young man, I would have misread that as weakness. And that allowance now I see as not necessary, but what you gonna do about it, right? There's some people whose minds aren't going to be changed, and we shouldn't waste our energy trying to change them. We don't have to change anybody. We have to make room. The table's getting bigger regardless, right? People are gonna be included regardless. It's a matter of what happens when they get included. Do they get traumatized or do they get wrapped up in love? And what kind of community do you want to live in? Now, I don't want to embrace somebody, let's say, from a different group, because I don't want to use the Klan because they're super controversial. I don't want to embrace somebody from a different group necessarily who might offend me in some way, but make room, right? I don't want to necessarily have a particular person, or maybe I'm uncomfortable, or maybe I don't understand or whatever else, and I got to do the work of figuring out some new thing, or do the work of asking questions, or do the work of like community, because it's not just living there, right? I think those are things that our hands have been idle on for way too long, right? We've allowed all these definitions to happen around us instead of going, oh yeah, no, that's not what love means here. No, I remember when I was younger, it used to happen all the time. Pastors used to do it in particular, reclaiming words, right? Going in and saying, that's not what love is anymore. That's not what love meant. Or love requires this embellishment now in this moment. The rearticulation of love has always been what progresses communities, what progresses more love, right? Is figuring out what love means now, not just what love means, right? And in that progression, we find ourselves loving ourselves. And in that understanding, we find ourselves including people, not out of some obligation, but because we see ourselves over there, not in trauma or in some horror that could have happened to us, but in love. And in that capacity, we invite other people to love. Like, how could you not want somebody to, you know what I mean? You experience all that. How could you not want to share that with someone? I think it's that community that I don't know. I want to say communion. That's the word that's on my mind. I'm gonna say it. It's in that communion that community comes, right? It's not just in having the same zip code, being on the same street. That's not community. I struggle to imagine, honestly, like I said, a world in which that's happening. And I'm kind of glad I struggle to imagine it because it means I'm getting old. Not old yet, but I'm creeping towards it. Right? When you start to struggle to picture the future, you're probably not in it. And to be honest, I'm
That's
kind of
another
glad
whole.
about it.
That's another whole podcast. That's another whole, that was
I'll say
deep
I'm glad
too.
about it.
That was deep too. But that's another.
I'm telling you, listen, I'm glad about it because I think it means the world is moving toward progress faster than I'm able to apprehend or detect. And who wouldn't welcome that? Who wouldn't welcome the world skipping over what you thought it was capable of because kids are better than you? That's where I've gone from being this scared, terrified little black boy, scared of white people, scared of everybody, scared of myself, to this now, like fully realized queer adult, gay if you prefer. I gotta say real quick, like why I prefer queer rather than gay.
Yes.
Because there's a
Finish us on that. Finish us on that.
This is important to me, and I say I came here. I started gay, and then I identify as queer. Just briefly, gay is so politicized, and in particular, like gay has been used to advance a lot of specific agenda, like agenda specific to moneyed people. It hasn't always included people who look like me, right? Queer has. Gay, very isolated. It's like, well, gay is mostly men, but women we can include you too. And then we have to like make sure we feminize gay women and queer women and all this other kind of stuff because we want to have no. I like people not knowing. I like it. It's none of your business. Like I like people get. It's none of your business. I don't know. I'd share it with somebody if I was going to date them, just like you would. But other than that, like it's none of your business. it's not just hiding in obscurity or ambiguity. It's literally withholding that thing that you could then use to bludgeon me with. You got to use the bigger, more blunt object that shows you for how dumb that you are. You got to pick up the stupid plastic hammer and beat me with the ineffective one. Queen, it doesn't even hurt me.
Mm.
That
Thank you, man. Thank you.
It's important to me. Like, well, I'll leave it there.
I
I'll
appreciate
ramble all night.
I know. I'm telling you, we're gonna have to do this again. I can tell you that this. But I will say this: thank you so much, man. You have shared
Thank
so
you.
much. Some we actually recorded.
I appreciate the opportunity.
And that's
really
why
do.
I like being around you. That's why I like hanging out with you, and that's why I like hearing from you. And I appreciate it. I so appreciate it. So
Likewise.
thank you so much, Drew.